5.5 million years ago, the Mediterranean Sea disappeared. Not shrank, disappeared. In its place sat a scorching salt desert kilometers below sea level, littered with poisonous brine lakes. And then, in a single geological instant, the Atlantic Ocean broke through Gibraltar and refilled the entire basin, possibly in less than 2 years. The flood that did it has no equal in the known history of our planet. And it happened while our earliest ancestors were just finding their feet in Africa. For decades, nobody believed a word of it. The proof came from a drill ship, a lump of white rock, and scientists who were told they had contaminated their own samples. By the end of this, you'll understand how an entire sea died, what walked across its floor, and why the whole thing could happen again. Summer 1970. A drilling ship called the Glomar Challenger sits over the deep western Mediterranean, punching holes into the seabed beneath 3 kilometers of water. The co-chief scientists, Kenneth Sue and William Ryan, expect mud. Ordinary, boring, deep ocean mud. What comes up instead is gypsum, a mineral that forms when seawater evaporates under a blazing sun. Then anhydrite, then rock salt, layer after layer, hundreds of meters of it, sitting on the floor of one of the deepest basins on Earth. The first reaction was that somebody had contaminated the samples. Nobody had, and there was more: desiccation cracks, wind-blown silt, and stromatolites, mats built by bacteria that need sunlight. Every single clue in those cores said the same impossible thing. This seabed had once been dry, cracked, open ground, baking in the air. The Mediterranean had evaporated, but a drill ship only samples a few points. The clinching evidence was already buried under 2 great rivers, and nobody had understood what it meant. In the 1960s, Soviet engineers surveying the ground for Egypt's Aswan High Dam drilled down through the Nile Valley and kept going and going. Beneath the modern river lay a gorge cut into solid granite, packed with later sediment. Follow that hidden canyon downstream, and under Cairo, its floor sits roughly 2.5 kilometers below today's sea level, deeper than the Grand Canyon, and completely invisible. In France, the Rhone hides the same story near Lyon. Here's the problem. A river cannot carve below the sea it flows into. For those canyons to exist, the Mediterranean surface had to fall by kilometers. 2 continents, 2 rivers, one impossible conclusion. So how do you actually kill a sea? Start with the fact that the Mediterranean is already losing. Under that sun, it evaporates far more water than every river feeding it can replace. The Nile, the Rhone, all of it. The only thing keeping it full is the Atlantic pouring through the Strait of Gibraltar. Now shut that door. Africa is grinding northwards into Europe, and around 6 million years ago, the tectonic squeeze pinched the gateway closed. Cut off, the Mediterranean would run dry in roughly 1,000 years. A blink, and it clearly happened over and over. Geologists have mapped about 1 million cubic kilometers of salt down there, in places kilometers thick. To lay down that much salt, you would have to fill the entire sea with Atlantic water and evaporate it more than a dozen times. Now, picture standing on that floor. You are 3 to 5 kilometers below global sea level, deeper than any dry land on Earth today, around 7 times lower than the shore of the Dead Sea. The air is thick and heavy, compressed by its own weight, and models suggest temperatures down there push past 70 degrees Celsius. Not a beach, a furnace. Across it stretched blinding white salt flats, scattered with dense brine, lakes so salty that almost nothing could survive in them. And here's the part people forget. With the sea gone, the barrier was gone too. Animals simply walked across. Africa and Europe were briefly stitched together, and species crossed a basin that had been open water for millions of years. If you want to touch it, go to Sicily. In the Real Monte salt mine, you can walk through those walls today. Then it ended. And the way it ended is the part that sounds made up. For years, the picture was a giant waterfall spilling over a Gibraltar dam, a cascade thundering into the empty basin. In 2009, a team led by Daniel Garcia Castellanos published something better in Nature. Using boreholes and seismic surveys gathered for a proposed tunnel under the strait, they mapped a channel carved straight through the Gibraltar Arch, around 200 kilometers long, buried, and packed with sediment. It wasn't a wall that broke. It was a trickle. Atlantic water found a low point and began to leak through. The leak eroded the rock. The wider channel let more water through, which eroded faster, which let more water through. A runaway loop. And once it tipped, the Mediterranean refilled with a violence that has no equal in Earth's known history. Here are the numbers. At its peak, the flood is estimated to have discharged around 100 million cubic meters of water every second. That is roughly 1,000 times the flow of the Amazon out of a single channel. Water tore downhill at something like 40 meters per second, over 140 kilometers an hour, a river the size of a mountain range moving at motorway speed. The Mediterranean surface rose more than 10 meters a day. 90% of the basin refilled in somewhere between a few months and 2 years. Think about that. A sea that took 1,000,000 years to die came back in less time than a school year. If you had been standing on that salt floor, you would not have heard it coming until the horizon itself turned white and started moving. And now the twist that reaches all the way to us. Locking 1,000,000 cubic kilometers of salt into one basin stripped an estimated 5 to 6% of all the dissolved salt out of the world's oceans. Change ocean salinity and you change where water freezes, how it sinks, how currents turn. So a dried up sea may have nudged the entire planet's climate at the exact moment our ancestors' world was being reshaped. And it isn't finished. Africa is still pushing north about 2 centimeters a year, and Gibraltar is slowly closing again. On a long enough timeline, the Mediterranean is a temporary feature, a puddle between two colliding continents that has already blinked out once. Everything you think of as permanent, including the coastline in your favorite holiday photo, is just a sea holding its breath. Subscribe for more stories like this.